My name's Gavin Stolar, and I'm the Honorary Chairman of the Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel.
Hello and welcome to the LibDem Podcast, and we're back with another episode from our virtual conference. And today I have a great pleasure of having the LibDem Friends of Israel come to us, and their chair, Gavin Stolar, who's here. Hi, Gavin. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
Very good. I'm very excited to continue these podcasts into the virtual conference, and people like yourself, giving them an opportunity to come and speak and show your wares and tell us what you do within the party. So we might as well crack straight into it. So you obviously, the Friends of Israel has been around for a long time. Actually, it's one of the oldest established groups within the Lib Dems, and even predates the Lib Dems. So why don't you talk a little bit about your organisation and what your aims are? Sure.
And first of all, thank you, John, for the work you're doing in putting these podcasts together. They're really, really valuable. And as a group, we've all been keenly following everything you've been putting out. I mean, as an associated organisation, the LibDem Friends of Israel exists fundamentally to act as a facilitator and an educator within the party on issues as they relate to the Middle East, particularly the Israel-Palestine issue, but also to act as a facilitator and a conduit to the UK Jewish community and UK diaspora as an entry point into the party. And we've done this, as you allude to, for many, many years. We were the first Friends of Israel group set up in any of the political parties back in the 1950s. And we take our role very seriously. We're a group of committed volunteers. We have a very avid following and membership. And we see ourselves as very much a key and fundamental part of the Lib Dem family.
Brilliant. And I mean, it's been an extraordinary few years for the Jewish community. I mean, particularly when you think of everything from the election of Jeremy Corbyn, obviously everything to do with the antisemitism issue, the extraordinary intervention by the chief rabbi in British politics for the general election in 2019. So I take it that's also a part of your remit. It's also being a voice for the Jewish community and Jewish community fears, concerns and aims and goals within Britain as well.
Yeah, I mean, we were asked by a couple of people within the wider community to get involved in the Enough is Enough protest outside Parliament that happened at the height of the anti-Semitism crisis with Corbyn. And I took the considered view that whilst we all would have wanted to be on College Green and protesting, that the presence of another political party group like ours would have detracted and made it look like it was somehow
partisan.
Partisan issue, whereas actually it was a fundamental issue. So yes, that has shaped a large part of certainly what the Jewish diaspora has been talking about politically over the last sort of 2 years. But if you look at the outturn of that crisis, it's been the most ringing endorsement for the Lib Dems. If you look at the fact that Luciana Berger, who has almost become the poster child for everything that was wrong with Labour's anti-Semitism, the place she felt most able, most comfortable to come to politically, the safest political party was our party. And there's no better ringing endorsement of our sort of measured and considered views on Israel, Middle East and Jewish domestic issues than someone like Luciana joining the party.
And just moving on from that a little bit and taking it a little bit further, is there any kind of policies that you'd like to see the Lib Dems do more to help, say, the Jewish community or the Israeli issue or anything like that? Is there anything where you think maybe the Lib Dems aren't being as forceful, as proactive as like what you'd like?
Do you know what? I mean, I look at the leadership we've had over my time as tenure as chairman of LDFI, and we've been through a few leaders, but starting with Nick Clegg in 2010 and going through, we've actually, whilst it hasn't caught many of the headlines, as a party, we've been very progressive and very much ahead of the curve on a lot of these issues, whether it be religious slaughter and respecting the religious slaughter requirements for shechita and the production of kosher food and halal food. We've been very progressive on that. Whether it be the protection of Jewish schools and their right to exist within the fundamental state system. Again, we've been leading in that. And again, a lot of these issues aren't necessarily exclusive to the Jewish community. They usually transcend across religious communities. And on the Israel issue, I think, you know, we've been measured, we've been considered. I think our ghosts of the past, when I think of the likes of Baroness Tong and David Ward and some of those characters, the party has acted actually quite decisively to rid the party of that, of those types of people. So I think, broadly speaking, we're in as good a place as ever, and I think that culminates in people like Luciana and people like Lord Monroe Palmer and Sarah Ludford being active advocates within LDFI, because we've actually been a progressive and positive voice on most of our issues, which is testament to our supporters. And I think in some small way can be put down to my organisation, certainly not me, but the people that work within the LDFI to take those strides.
And so what's next? So what's the goals going forward?
A brilliant question. I mean, on the Israel side, we've just seen a decoupling of the Blue and White Party, whereby Benny Gantz has gone into coalition with Mr. Netanyahu to form the fifth Netanyahu-led government in Israel. No one in LDFI would be voting for Mr. Netanyahu if we lived in Israel and had a vote. We were very much supportive of the secular liberal Zionist agenda of the Blue and White Party led by Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid. I think the first challenge is for us to maintain relevance in that Israeli governmental political position, and I think we still remain supportive of Yair Lapid and the liberal secular Zionist agenda. So I'd like to see, first and foremost, I'd like to see our party encouraging the Yesh Atid led by Yair Lapid to join Liberal International. I think that would be a really big step in the right direction, and I'd like to see that happen. And I also think we need to be on top of anti-Semitism. It doesn't go away, and in these ever nationalistic times, we need to ensure that scapegoats aren't made of the Jewish community or indeed of any community.
And I suppose we saw that with the Corbyn leadership within the Labour group, just how quickly it can come back. And, you know, and as someone who is, you know, from the centre left, to see the troubles that the far left have with anti-Semitism and have historically had with anti-Semitism, it was incredibly scary for the Jewish community all over the UK, thinking, you know, what happens next if Corbyn ever got into power? Now, Keir Starmer's come out very early. I think it was maybe his first statement as the leader was to reassure the Jewish community. So what would you like to see from, you know, people across the country, or what would the Jewish community like to see? Is it just kind of just think twice before you make generalizations, I suppose? Yeah,
I mean, language is the key point here, John, and I think it's really critical that that language is maintained and kept in check. And some of our parliamentarians can sometimes get a little bit lazy in some of their terminology. And what's been very helpful as a steer in this whole debate has been the contribution, actually, historically, of people like Chris Huhne in the parliamentary inquiry into anti-Semitism. I mean, what we've had is some clear guidance. The IHRA adoption by the party has been a very, very progressive and positive move. One of the first parties in the UK to adopt it. So we've now got much more of a framework as a party to deal with any infractions in terms of language or suggested anti-Semitic tropes or language. But in a wider sense, and amongst the membership and amongst the wider populace, I just think we all need to think a little bit twice about the language we use and when we're engaging in debate. And you know, the Labour Party have fallen foul of this in such a fundamental way that if there is a benefit of what's happened with Labour, it's been that it's brought home the enormity of the issue of language and how Jewish people and anyone who advocates for Israel, actually, for that matter, need to be engaged with and treated in the same way as we would expect anyone of any ethnic minority or anyone engaging on any geopolitical issue across the world.
And just picking up on a point you said about people conflating the two of Judaism and Israel. I mean, on the flip side of that is obviously people who, I mean, unfortunately, people who are racist will use Israel to criticize a religion, and they conflate the two. Now, given that you're called Friends of Israel, was there ever kind of a thought that actually would you be better be called the Friends of Judaism or something like that? How does that work within your group?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue that comes up from time to time. I think we're not ashamed of the fact that we're supportive of the state of Israel, and we're supportive of a two-state solution. We don't see conversely, funnily enough, we don't see the Palestinians as the enemy. And actually, some of the pro-Palestinian groups in the UK in particular, which is a hub of pro-Palestinian activism, a large proportion of people like the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign see Israel as the enemy, as a fundamental entity. We don't see the Palestinians as an enemy. So we don't see there's any conflict between being pro-Israel and being pro-two-state, but also being a facilitator and an advocate for the UK Jewish community. And in that guise, we perform a very effective and very valuable function, because in the party we're seen as Lib Dems as we are. We're out there canvassing and raising money and active on social media in the way that all active party members are. So in the party we're seen as part of the home team, and in the community we're seen as leaders, lay leaders in the Jewish community, and a very useful and positive conduit to give an entry point. But having said that, we're not precious about the communal organisations, whether that's Community Security Trust, Holocaust Educational Trust, the Jewish Leadership Council, the Board of Deputies of Issues. They all have their own relationships and access, if you like, into the leadership, the parliamentary party, etc. So we don't try and be precious and control that. We're just here as an adjunct and an additional voice and an additional support to all that the community does here.
And other than, say, people like myself who are not in the Jewish community, joining, say, the Friends of Israel, that was obviously, you'd love to get more members. But what kind of goals should people like myself set? People who are not just councillors and leaders like myself, but also just listeners or members. How would you like them to get more involved and help you guys out?
Yeah, well, look, joining is great. Asking to join our mailing list is also great to keep yourself informed. We don't send lots of emails out willy-nilly, because I think we've all grown sort of tired and have a fatigue of too many LibDem emails. So we're very judicious about when we send updates on the elections. We've sent 1 or 2 update briefings. So join the mailing list to keep yourself informed. Come along to our conference events. We always have very spirited and very full rooms at conference. And there's different ways for people to get involved, subject to how committed or interested they are. We've had a number of approaches from people who are interested in getting involved, and activism, as takes any different forms. We've had people that just coming in saying they want to sit on the committee and add to the sort of brain power, brain matter that we have. So we're a broad church and an open church.
Can I ask now, just moving, because you've mentioned about Luciana Berger and her influence. Now, obviously, 2019, she was so close to getting elected. Have you heard much from Luciana about how she's doing, what her next steps are? And particularly, there's been, obviously, because none of the people that actually defected across to the Lib Dems kept their seats. Yeah. So, and which was obviously, some of them were very close, like Luciana and Chuka. So have you heard much from Luciana? Is she well? Is she wanting to get back at it, or how is she?
So Luciana's well, as far as I know. I think she's taken some time out post the craziness, as we know, of election campaign. She's a young mother. She had her child in the midst of the faction that broke away from the Corbyn-led Labour Party. So my understanding of her position currently is that she's taken some time out to draw breath. Obviously, the virus coming along has intervened in that as well. But I think we will be seeing and hearing more from her in the coming months. But look, running a general election campaign from a standing start is hard, and it takes a lot out of you. Obviously, we all would have liked her to have got elected, and great testament to the Barnet local party, who really threw everything at it. And they weren't a party that was necessarily in fighting fit, match fitness form to be able to do that, and they got very, very close, as we know. So I think we haven't heard the last from her, rest assured, and I think there's more to come.
And widening that out, obviously, I think the Lib Dems benefited a lot from the chaos within the Labour Party over the Corbyn years from the Jewish community, certainly feeling, like you've said earlier, as a safe home for them and a natural home for the Jewish community. Now, with Keir Starmer and a more moderate Labour group now seeming to be in charge, we'll see what happens. It's obviously very early days within the Keir leadership. Are there not concerns on your behalf, but things that maybe the Jewish community may go back to Labour, or how do you see that?
I think that the idea of kind of categorising the UK Jewish community in a homogeneous sense as to there is one view is fanciful and foolhardy. But you've asked a specific question about Labour folk who. Possibly Labour voters, Labour supporters, and then to an extreme Labour members, will they be going back to Labour and leaving us? And I think the only thing I would say on that is Keir Starmer, talk is cheap, and I have a high regard for Keir. He's a very good friend of a very good friend. So there's a link there on a personal level, and I understand him to be a man of good moral standing and clearly good intellect and political judgment. So I'm hopeful that his words will be translated into deeds. But my concern is that the level of rottenness in the Labour Party that's been born out of the membership and the supporter database and supporter base that they have, it cannot be rooted out by one man at the top of the party. So it's going to take a generation. You look at the union support as well that Keir Starmer had, and you look at some of the statements that people like Len McCluskey have made. So they have a core power base in the Labour Party. All I would say to Labour members and Labour voters who have supported our party and using the anti-Semitism issue as a sort of totemic thing that's moved them over to us is, we've been consistent. We've been consistently supportive of the community. We've been consistently supportive of a two-state solution as a resolution to the Israel-Palestine crisis. And as a Friends of Israel group, we've been a consistent voice in our party that's supported by every party leader and parliamentary group for as long as I've been involved, which is a very long time. So I would say we're a safe home and we're a consistent home. And in order for Labour to make good on their words of the leader as an incoming leader, there's a long way to go on that for us to be convinced that they're worthy. And it's our job as a party now, and that's a responsibility of all of us, to ensure that the people that have come over stay and vest with us. And that's all of our responsibility.
I suppose a kind of a final point from us is obviously you mentioned earlier about the new Israeli government has been established after, I think, 3 elections in the last year. Is that correct? So where do you see next for Israel? How do you think? Obviously, Netanyahu's got all sorts of issues regarding a trial that's pending that now has to be delayed because he's the premier again for another 6 months, I believe. So what's next for Israel, as much as anyone can know?
Well, I think Israel's no different from us and the rest of the world at the moment in terms of coming out to the other side of the virus, both from a health perspective and an economic perspective. But in terms of the wider question, I think there's an opportunity. An interesting statement that was made of Netanyahu, which has always resonated with me, is that Netanyahu has for a long time been the king of the Israeli right. There is an opportunity for him, as long as he sits in that highest of office, there's an opportunity for him to become the king of Israel, and he's uniquely placed because he can bring the right and the centre to a position which reaches an accommodation and a lasting peace with the Palestinians. And it's a question. I mean, there is no one more astute geopolitical, and domestically political player than Bibi Netanyahu. So the question of on the Middle East issue is, does he have an appetite to be the king of Israel rather than the king of the Israeli right? And that remains to be seen. So our hope is that he does have that appetite, and the sort of centre left will, I'm sure, support those moves. But he has his own individual personal and legal challenges first and foremost. But the interesting thing here to note, I suppose, and this is one for listeners to watch, is that if it does go badly wrong for Netanyahu on a legal basis, and that plays out in full public eye, you do have someone who sat next to a liberal secular Zionist party, who's obviously broken away in his own right to become a deputy prime minister and a shared position as prime minister as the agreement goes. And if Mr. Netanyahu does cease to be prime minister, we would have a different individual in that hot seat, and I would back someone like a Benny Gantz, notwithstanding his notional political portrayal of breaking away and joining the Netanyahu government as of today. Imagine a situation where someone like Benny Gantz is sitting in the prime ministerial chair, and what a difference that could mean to the prospects for Israel and Middle East peace. On a wider scope, I would just say that Israel is leading the way in tech and in biotech and in so many different industrial commercial areas, and its contribution to the sort of global economy and in particular science, tech and healthcare, it knows no bounds, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people support Israel as a startup nation, because of the contribution it makes to the wider sort of the wider geo-economical place, and I hope that continues to flourish.
Brilliant. Well, all I can say is just thank you so much for your time today. A really fascinating conversation. Like I say, any listeners, members who want to get more involved, please do go check out the LibDem Friends of Israel. They're on Twitter at _LDFI. They have the website. You're on Facebook. You're on all sorts of different things, and just encourage you to go check them out. If you've got questions, ask questions. If you want to learn more, feel free just to ask them. And if you want to know more about an issue of what you can do to help the Jewish community, what the Jewish community is doing in your area, you don't know. But all I can say, Gavin, is thank you so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate your time today. And just look after yourself. And like everyone else, if you want to follow anything to do with the LibDem Pod, please go online on either Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at LibDem Pod. Please subscribe to us via your podcast providers so you get all these episodes coming to you without any effort whatsoever. We obviously have a new YouTube channel where all these episodes go on. Please subscribe and check out the channel on YouTube. But as always, during this coronavirus crisis, do keep safe. Do look after yourself, and we'll be back very soon with another episode.